The John Tung Foundation released a survey on adolescent internet use and mental health on Wednesday, revealing that approximately 5% of teenagers experienced cyberbullying in the past year. Conducted from March to May this year among more than 2,000 junior and senior high school students nationwide, the survey found that 74% of teens primarily use the internet to watch videos. Nearly 39% of adolescents spend more than 6 hours online during weekends. Those online more than 6 hours a day exhibited significantly higher levels of stress, loneliness, and depressive emotions compared to those using the internet for less than 1 hour.
Did you know that in Taiwan, 4.9% of teenagers endure cyberbullying during the past year? That is about 54,000 students nationwide. And among the victims, 24% reported suicide attempts or self-harm, as cyberbullying heightens feelings of stress, isolation, and depression. And very sadly, 17% of teens chose not to seek help from others, and only a small single-digit percentage of students sought help from their teachers. According to Alliance for Universal Digital Rights, regulations of the digital world is inconsistent and ineffective. Those who are most profoundly affected by this are the people, groups, and communities with the least power and privilege. In February, I met someone who is tackling this issue on a global scale and raising awareness of the fact that not everyone is protected on the internet. My name is Iris Xu. You are listening to The Divide.
Mrinalini, Dayal, and Alliance for Universal Digital Rights.
Mrinalini is an advocate for gender equality and social justice. She joined Equality Now in 2025 as the global coordinator for Alliance for Universal Digital Rights.
We are a global network of CSOs from around the world, and we work on human rights in the digital space from an intersectional and feminist lens. And we have our digital principles, which is our framework, and they're quite broad. They include, for example, tech-facilitated gender-based violence, access to the internet, women's participation, freedom of expression, and we worked last year quite closely with the Global Digital Compact to try to ensure as many of our principles as possible could be in the compact. And now this year we're looking at creating a digital scorecard, which is again based on our principles, and have it be a sort of monitoring and implementation tool. So what we're using RightsCon as a way is to get input from different folks that are here for their different regions, like which one of the principles are the most relevant or resonate with the region the most. And then we, along in the Alliance and with all our members and other organizations, using a multi-stakeholder approach, want to co-create this digital scorecard.
The Alliance is calling for the adoption of a universal digital rights framework rooted in human rights law and underpinned by an intersectional feminist anti-discrimination analysis. And they have proposed a set of digital principles developed to inform global efforts towards a digital future in which everyone can enjoy equal rights to safety, freedom, and dignity. The principles focus on women, girls, and other people from discriminated against groups who experience intersecting forms of violence, oppression, and discrimination in the real world. I asked Mrinalini who she thinks is the most vulnerable community in the digital world.
There's a lot of communities, so we particularly are looking at women and girls, obviously, but other communities include the LGBTQ community, people with disabilities, migrants. Yeah, I think that would be one of the groups.
And you mentioned a digital scorecard. Could you tell us a little bit?
Yeah, the digital scorecard is something we're working on. Again, it's going to be rooted in the digital principles, and it will be a monitoring and implementation tool that we want to see governments, how they're faring on our different principles. Again, it's quite a broad range. And one of the ways or processes we might use it on is the Global Digital Compact.
How big is the Alliance for Universal Digital Rights?
So we have about close to 60 members in the Alliance. We have a larger group of supporters, and then we have the Secretariat, which is Equality Now and Women Leading in AI, and then we have a whole steering committee as well. So quite a lot of organizations, but we're constantly looking to expand and to make it stronger.
So how does Audrey, or the Alliance for Universal Digital Rights, came up with that 10 principles?
So it was a multi-stakeholder approach that had multiple iterations, and it happened over quite a few years. So it included consultations with human rights lawyers, with CSOs that work on the ground, with different agencies, with academics, experts. So it was a very long, drawn-out process. And like I mentioned, it's quite broad in what it includes. For example, it even includes the environmental impact of new technology. We're looking at equality by design principles. We're looking at participation, surveillance. So really thinking about how those are rooted in intersectionality. So what you just mentioned, which is how all groups are affected, and making sure that everyone is taken into account.
If you're interested and want to learn more about Audrey or Alliance for Universal Digital Rights work, go to audrey.org. You can find resources on sexual violence and harassment in the metaverse, doxing, digital abuse, and the law, as well as deepfake image-based sexual abuse, tech-facilitated sexual exploitation, and the law. The Alliance for Universal Digital Rights was founded in 2022 by two international gender equality and advocacy organizations, Equality Now and Women Leading in AI. Equality Now is a feminist organization using the law to protect and promote human rights of all women and girls. I ran into one of their representatives at RightsCon 2025.
I am Amanda Manyame, and I work at Equality Now.
I asked Amanda why Equality Now is at RightsCon 2025.
I am here to learn from everyone that is working on particularly tech-facilitated gender-based violence. I'm also here to share some of the experiences from my work from around the world on tech-facilitated gender-based violence. My organization, Equality Now, is an international human rights organization that works to achieve legal and systemic change for women and girls around the world. The specific thematic area that I work on is tech-facilitated sexual exploitation and abuse. So essentially just to make the world, the digital world, a safer space for women and girls globally. And we have quite a number of reports that extend from looking at sexual violence in the metaverse, looking at deepfake image-based abuse, as well as looking at the lived experiences of women and girls from tech-facilitated sexual exploitation in Kenya, in India, and in the US.
Amanda works at the intersection of technology and law. She advises and conducts research on digital law, policies, and human rights, and anticipates the legal risks and harms associated with technological innovation.
Yes, so we have a number of reports where you will find survivor case studies. So there are survivor stories throughout these reports where we've spoken to survivors, but we've also spoken to experts that have worked with survivors. We've also spoken to civil society organizations from different parts of the world that have also worked with survivors. So if you go on to our website, equalitynow.org, you will find all of those research reports.
Both Equality Now and the Alliance for Universal Digital Rights are trying to address the pressing question: how should one understand and address sexual violence and harassment in the metaverse? According to their reports, sexual violence and harassment beyond the offline realm are not a new experience. The notion of virtual rape was introduced as early as 1993. When a user in a virtual world uses a text-based subprogram, forcing other avatars to describe explicit sexual acts and engage in sexual behaviors. While this incident is deeply harmful and potentially criminal, it did not match the legal qualification as rape. And this was due to the absence of the criminal offenses elements, such as the act of penetration, and could not consequently face criminal prosecution. And because of it, Amanda and her team are actively working with civil society organizations, tech companies, and policy influencers to provide an understanding of the different considerations that influence tech policy, law, and digital rights.
So besides documenting, and the reason why we document is to have evidence. So we really work around legal and systemic change. So we want to change policy at global level, regional level, and national level. And to do that, we need the evidence, we need the survivor voices, we need to amplify them so that policymakers can understand what the problem is, where the problem is, and how the problem needs to change. So really a lot of our work has been to bring about this legal change, and we've been able to do that in a number of countries. Again, if you go onto our website, you'll find all the spaces that we've been able to influence some of the policy change. You'll see it in Kenya, you'll see it in some of the protocols coming out of the African Union. You'll also see it in the Organization of American States, where we are advising on a model law on tech-facilitated gender-based violence, and we've also worked with a number of special rapporteurs and UN agencies and governments as well around some of the legal changes that we need to see globally.
I asked Amanda whether policymakers are acknowledging the problem.
We have found that policymakers are starting to really understand what tech-facilitated gender-based violence and particularly sexual exploitation online is. They're trying to see where the problem is. They're starting to see where the problem is as well. And because of that, we are seeing quite a number of legislative change. And the change is really around specific forms such as image-based sexual abuse. We're also seeing it around issues of gender-based violence broadly. So some of the gender-based violence laws are also changing to include the online aspects. But there's also some gaps in these policies. So it's not all the different forms that are being provided for. So you'll find children are protected a lot, not enough, but they are protected a lot. But when it comes to adult women, that is when then you start to see that there is a little bit of a gap. So it's not necessarily that it is a pushback, but sometimes just really an understanding of where the problem is and how the problem manifests itself. But there is really increased political will to address TFGBV. The biggest challenge that we are seeing is around implementation of these laws. So where we are seeing that policy change, the implementation is still lagging behind. So it comes into law enforcement. So when a survivor goes to report, how is the law enforcement officer responding to this report? You're also seeing it in the community. Is there still stigmatization of a particularly sexual violence online? Is there stigmatization or isn't there? You're also seeing it particularly from a social media perspective, where the society then pushes back on a survivor who's reported a particular case. So it's the implementation of the law where there is law, but there are still countries where the law does need to catch up with these forms of harms.
If you're a female internet user in Taiwan, online sexual harassment is almost a norm, yet the harassers often face little to no legal repercussions.
That is really the case for other places in the world. It is also a silencing of women's voices. So the moment one survivor speaks out about her experience and she is shut down on social media, she's shut down by the police stations, it makes other survivors not want to speak up. The moment she's not believed, or the moment it is very difficult for her to access justice, it will make the next survivor not want to speak up. And that then makes the problem bigger because then perpetrators know that they can violate a woman and she's not going to complain, she's not going to say anything, or she's not going to be believed, or worse off, she's not going to be helped. So the stigmatization of the harms, whether they are online or offline, has continued, and it is a bigger problem. It's not really just in East Asia alone. It is really a bigger global problem, which is why we do a lot of research and speak to survivors as well to try talk about the problem and to show that it just doesn't happen in one region, it doesn't happen to one woman, but it is happening more often than we would want to talk about.
I use social media regularly, and I see a lot of women are fighting back against the harassment that they face online. But while trying to address bad behaviors, they are often told that they are too sensitive.
We need to sensitize society. We need to apply a gendered lens when we're speaking to communities. It needs to not be understood as you are too sensitive, but it needs to be understood as that is a violation of someone's right. Had it been done to a man, or to anybody else, they would have the same complaint. So just because it has happened to a woman does not mean that she is too sensitive or she is too soft. But a lot more community engagement needs to happen for it to be understood as a problem. I believe there's no man or there's no father who would want these harms to happen to their child. So in the same way, you would not want it to happen to your neighbor's child or to your neighbors. So we need to talk about it firstly a lot more, and we need to sensitize the communities, and that is something that media can also do, even in the reporting of the stories. You need to adopt a more gendered lens.
If you wanted to learn more about Amanda's work, go to equalitynow.org. That is equalitynow.org. And thank you for listening. My name is Iris Xu. This episode of The Divide is brought to you by Radio Taiwan International.